He was arrested without a reason. Then the police discovered who he really was. It was early morning in the city. The streets were just waking up. Shops were opening, people walked fast to work, and the air smelled like fresh coffee and car fumes. A man stepped out of a small diner on the corner. He wore a clean, dark suit, shiny shoes, and carried a quiet kind of confidence. His steps were steady, calm. His name was Elijah. He had just finished breakfast: eggs, turkey bacon, fruit. The waitress knew his usual order. She smiled when he left and said, "Have a good day, Mr. Elijah." He smiled back, adjusted the cuffs on his shirt, and walked toward his parked car. As he reached for his keys, 2 police officers appeared from across the street. He noticed them before they spoke. Their walk was heavy, their eyes locked onto him. No smile, no greeting. "Sir, show us your ID," one of them said, sharp and cold. Elijah blinked, confused. "Good morning," he said, polite but puzzled. "May I ask why?" The officer didn't answer. He just repeated, "Your ID." Elijah paused. He wasn't afraid, but he was cautious. This wasn't the first time. His father had taught him how to speak to police. Keep your voice calm. Keep your hands in sight. Stay respectful. Don't give them a reason. He slowly reached into his coat. "All right, officer, I'll get it for you," he said, handing over his wallet. The officer took the ID and looked at it too long, like he didn't really care what was on it. The other officer stayed silent, his hand resting near his holster. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" the first one asked. Elijah's eyebrows lifted slightly. "I just had breakfast," he said. "Heading to my car. Is something wrong?" "You match the description of someone we're looking for," the officer said. He didn't say who. He didn't explain. "I see," Elijah said slowly. "Well, I hope that person gets found, but I've done nothing wrong." The officers didn't move, didn't thank him, didn't walk away. "What do you do for work?" the silent officer finally asked. "I'm a lawyer," Elijah replied. "I have a meeting soon, so if there's nothing else..." That's when it shifted. The mood turned heavier. The officer's eyes narrowed. "You got anything in that car we should know about?" Elijah took a careful breath. "Nothing illegal. No. I'd prefer you didn't waste time checking it. I'm just trying to get to work." The reply didn't go over well. "You don't tell us how to do our job," the first officer snapped. "Step away from the car." Elijah hesitated. His heart beat faster, but his face stayed calm. "All right," he said, slowly raising both hands. "I'm stepping back." He took one step, then it happened fast. The first officer grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. Elijah gasped, caught off guard. The second officer was already behind him, grabbing the other arm, pushing him down. "Hey, what are you doing?" Elijah asked, voice strained but steady. "I'm not resisting." "You're under arrest for resisting," the officer replied coldly, snapping the cuffs tight. Elijah said nothing. He bit his tongue and let them finish. He knew better than to fight. He had seen this before. He had read about it, heard it in courtrooms. But living it, being the one on the ground in cuffs, was different. People were watching. A woman from a balcony across the street shouted, "That man didn't do anything!" A couple nearby started recording. One man whispered, "This is messed up." Elijah saw the phone. For 1 second, he let himself hope. Maybe the truth would come out. Maybe the video would help. As the officers lifted him and shoved him into the back of the police car, he turned his head toward the crowd. His voice was calm but firm. "This isn't over," he said, loud enough for people to hear. They drove off. The city kept moving like nothing happened. But inside that car, Elijah sat upright. He didn't panic. He didn't yell. He just thought. Because while the officers thought they were taking in just another man, they had no idea who he really was. and soon, the whole station would find out. The ride to the police station was quiet. Elijah sat in the back seat, his wrists still tight in the cuffs. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared out the window. The city blurred past. People walked. Taxis honked. The world went on, unbothered, unaware that one man's life had just changed in seconds. Inside the police car, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, tense. The officers didn't say a word to Elijah. The one named Riley kept glancing at the rearview mirror. The other, Jenkins, tapped his fingers on the dashboard like he was nervous. When they pulled up to the station, Riley opened the door and pulled Elijah out. "Let's move," he said. Elijah walked with them, quiet and calm. He looked around. Inside the station, it was cold. Gray walls, hard chairs, buzzing lights. Officers moved around quickly, typing at desks, answering phones, drinking coffee. Some glanced at him, confused. A man in a nice suit with clean shoes and quiet eyes, he didn't look like most people they brought in. They walked him to the front desk. The officer behind it barely looked up. "Name?" the desk officer asked. "Elijah," Riley answered. For him, handing over the ID. The desk officer typed something into the computer. Then he stopped. His eyes narrowed at the screen. He leaned in, then looked up at Elijah for the first time. But he didn't say anything. "Fingerprint him," Riley said quickly. "Standard procedure." Elijah said nothing as they led him to a small table. They took his fingerprints, scanned his ID again, and logged everything. The computer beeped softly. Then something unexpected happened. The young officer sitting behind the desk, new to the job, fresh out of training, stood up. He leaned toward Riley quietly. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "This name, it looks familiar." Riley frowned. "What do you mean? Familiar?" The young officer glanced at Elijah, then pulled out his phone. "I think I've seen this guy before. In a news article. I think he's—" Riley cut him off. "Finish booking him. We'll handle it." But the young officer didn't stop. He walked toward a woman on the other side of the room. Lieutenant Karen, a new leader in the department. Not loud, not flashy, but sharp, respected, and serious about doing things by the book. He leaned in and whispered, "Ma'am, I think we just arrested someone important." Karen turned her head. Her eyes locked on Elijah. "I saw him in an article," the young officer whispered. "He's not just a lawyer. He's a civil rights attorney. National cases, big wins. He's even worked with federal investigators." Karen's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. She stood up, her face calm but focused. "Where is he now?" she asked. "In holding." Karen walked through the hallway slowly, thinking with each step. She'd been in this department just a few months. She already knew it had problems, hidden things, quiet things. But this was something bigger. She stopped outside the holding cell. Through the bars, she saw Elijah sitting on a bench, still calm, hands in his lap, watching. Karen opened the door and stepped inside. "Mr. Elijah," she said evenly. "I'm Lieutenant Karen. I'd like to speak with you for a moment." Elijah nodded once. "Of course." "I've been told there was an incident during your arrest," she said. "Yes," Elijah replied. "I asked why I was being stopped. I gave them my ID. I followed instructions. Then I was pushed to the ground, cuffed, and brought here. No reason was given." Karen looked at him, trying to read him. His voice was calm, too calm, like he had practiced this moment, like he had expected it. "You say you're a lawyer," she said. "I am." "Do you have proof?" "You can check your system," Elijah said simply. "Or the news." Karen stepped back, pulled out her phone, and opened a search. It didn't take long. His name was there, His face, courtrooms, protests, interviews. His last case? A major lawsuit against another city's police department, one that had led to federal oversight. Karen stared at the screen for a long second, then looked back at him. And suddenly, everything clicked. He wasn't just a man walking to his car. He was a man carrying a purpose. She turned and walked out, her mind racing. Her voice low but firm. "Get the chief, now." In the back of the station, Elijah sat quietly once more. But the silence had changed. Now. The whole place felt it. They hadn't just arrested a man. They had started something they couldn't stop. Lieutenant Karen didn't wait. The moment she stepped out of the holding cell, her boots hit the tile floor with purpose. She moved straight down the hallway toward the chief's office, not stopping, not looking back. Her heart wasn't racing, but her mind was. A well-dressed civil rights attorney sitting in a holding cell, arrested for resisting, with no weapon, no drugs, no record, and no reason? This wasn't just an incident. This was a potential explosion waiting to happen. Inside, the chief's office, Frank, Chief Daniels, was reading through reports, rubbing his forehead. He was a man who had learned to survive years in the system by knowing which fires to ignore and which ones to put out. "Chief," Karen said, not bothering to knock. He looked up. "Lieutenant? I think we have a problem. A big one." Daniels frowned. "Go on." "The man Riley and Jenkins arrested this morning. His name is Elijah. That name mean anything to you?" Daniels shrugged. "Should it?" Karen tossed a folder on his desk. "It should now." Daniels opened it and started flipping through. News clippings, interviews, case files, photos. Elijah, standing outside court buildings, shaking hands with families, giving speeches at rallies. Headlines: Civil rights attorney exposes corrupt police force. Major lawsuit filed against city officers. Attorney working with federal agencies on systemic racism investigation. Daniels leaned back slowly in his chair. Karen crossed her arms. "We didn't just arrest a man on his way to work. We arrested a federal legal asset, someone who's already turned other departments inside out." The chief didn't speak right away. He scanned one headline twice. Then he said, "Does Riley know?" "No," Karen said. "I doubt it. They treated him like just another guy in a suit. But this isn't another guy. This is someone people listen to, someone the media knows." Daniels stood up, suddenly feeling the weight of it all. "How bad is it?" "Bad," Karen said. "And getting worse. There's already a crowd forming outside. Some people are recording. I heard chants earlier. The video's spreading." Daniels cursed under his breath. "We're going to be on the news by sundown." Back in the hallway, Riley and Jenkins sat at a desk, sipping coffee like they hadn't just set the station on fire. Karen walked up to them with no smile, no small talk. "I need to hear your side of the arrest," she said, firm. Riley raised an eyebrow. "We had reports of suspicious behavior." Karen folded her arms. "And what made Elijah suspicious?" "He looked like someone," Jenkins added. "He matched the description." "Which description?" Karen asked. Neither of them answered. Karen leaned in. "Do you even realize who he is?" They glanced at each other. "He said he was a lawyer," Riley mumbled. Karen nodded slowly. "He's not just a lawyer. He's a civil rights attorney, a public figure. He's been involved in multiple federal investigations, into departments, just like this one." Jenkins looked down. Riley tried to brush it off. "How were we supposed to know that?" "You weren't supposed to know," Karen replied. "You were supposed to do your job right. Ask questions, use basic judgment. Not throw a man in cuffs because of a hunch." Their silence said everything. Karen stepped back. "Go write your report. Every detail. Every word." Across the building, the energy had shifted. Officers whispered in corners. Phones buzzed with updates. The young rookie who had first recognized Elijah sat quietly, staring at the front desk, where his name was still glowing on the intake log. He knew it wasn't over. Outside, the crowd had grown larger. Signs had appeared. Voices were louder. A local reporter had shown up, mic in hand. The story was already moving. The cameras hadn't even seen Elijah's face yet, but the rumors were enough. Back in the holding cell, Elijah sat with his hands resting on his knees. His breathing was steady, but his thoughts weren't still. He had known this might happen one day. Not in this city. Not this way. But he knew the risks of standing up, of being black, successful, and not silent. He stared at the wall across from him. On it, someone had scratched a sentence into the paint long ago. Nobody listens until it's too late. He shook his head gently. They'll listen now, he whispered to himself. Then the door opened, not with force, but with focus. Karen stepped in, alone. She didn't carry a clipboard. She didn't speak immediately. Elijah looked up. She met his eyes. There was a quiet understanding between them. Two people from different lives, standing in the same storm. We're reviewing everything, she said, voice low. Elijah nodded once. Good. I just want you to know, she added. Some of us do care about doing this right. Elijah studied her. Then you know it's already gone too far. She didn't argue. She only said, You're not alone in this. Elijah stood slowly. I never was. And from that moment on, nothing in that station would be the same again. Outside the police station, the sidewalk was no longer just a sidewalk. It had become a platform, a protest line, a place where silence turned into sound. More people had gathered. Students, shopkeepers, neighbors, parents with kids. Some held signs. Some just stood still, arms crossed. Others had phones out, recording everything. The mood wasn't loud, not yet, but it was firm, controlled, focused. They weren't yelling for attention. They were waiting for answers. Inside, Lieutenant Karen stood near the glass entrance, watching. Her jaw was tight, but not angry, just locked in thought. She could hear the quiet thrum of the chants outside, mixing with the buzz of the fluorescent lights above her. She turned toward the hallway, where two other officers were murmuring. Is it true? One whispered. He's a federal asset? Karen didn't need to answer. The look on her face told them yes. In the briefing room, Chief Daniels sat slumped in his chair, rereading Elijah's profile for the third time. He was still trying to figure out how two officers had dragged a man like that into his station in cuffs. Not only had Elijah worked high-profile civil rights cases, but he was also connected to a federal task force currently investigating police, bias and corruption in 3 states. And now, thanks to Riley and Jenkins, he was here, in the holding cell, wrongfully arrested, being filmed from outside by angry citizens. Daniels picked up the phone to call the city's legal advisor but stopped, halfway through dialing. What was he even going to say? Hi, we arrested someone whose name is on the DOJ's witness list. Please don't sue us. The door opened behind him. It was Officer Stevens, the rookie who had first recognized Elijah's name. Daniels waved. Him in? What do you have? The chief asked. Stevens held up his tablet. There's already a live stream outside. One of the bystanders was recording when the officers cuffed Elijah. It's spreading fast. He's trending online. Daniels groaned. There's more, Stevens added. Civil rights leaders are tagging the department on social media. Local news vans just arrived, and a federal contact has requested access to our internal files. Someone tipped them off. Daniels leaned back in his chair. We're already behind, he muttered. Meanwhile, back in the cell, Elijah still hadn't moved. He had always been good at waiting. Courtrooms had trained him in patience, and he knew when storms came, you didn't run, you listened. because storms always told the truth. The door creaked open. This time, it wasn't Karen. A man in a dark blue suit stepped in. Confident, clean-cut, and carrying a badge on his belt. Federal. Mr. Elijah, he said, voice low. Agent Ward. Elijah stood. You're early. Ward smirked just slightly. I figured you'd make things interesting. They shook hands, briefly but firmly. Ward looked around the tiny holding cell, the stained bench, the metal sink. He let out a breath. You've already made your point. I haven't even started, Elijah replied. Outside the station, the crowd had doubled. A local pastor stood at the front, speaking calmly into a microphone. We are not here to start trouble. We are here to finish it. Justice doesn't sleep. Neither will we. Inside, Karen met Agent Ward in the hallway. Her posture was straight, but her face was tight with worry. Why wasn't he flagged in your system? She asked. He was, Ward replied. Problem is, your officers never checked. They walked together toward the chief's office. Ward glanced at her sideways. Tell me honestly, was this racial profiling? Karen paused. She wanted to say no, but the truth pressed heavy on her chest. I don't know yet, she said finally, but I won't hide the answer when I do. In the holding cell, Elijah had finally stood and faced the barred door, listening closely to the footsteps outside. He could hear them moving faster now, more nervous, less certain. Then the door opened again, fully this time. Karen stepped inside. Elijah, she said quietly, you're being released. He said nothing. Not yet. There will be a full review, she added. I'll be personally overseeing it. He looked at her, not angry, not even surprised. Just serious. I hope that review includes your department's silence. Karen nodded slowly. It has to. She handed him his belongings. Wallet, watch, phone. He checked the phone. 47 missed messages. He looked up. I imagine the world knows by now. Karen gave a small, regretful smile. They do. Together, they walked through the hallway, past officers who couldn't meet his gaze, past desks where whispers had now turned into silence. When they reached the doors, Karen turned. You could burn this place down, she said softly. Elijah shook his head. I don't need to. The truth does that for me. And then he stepped outside. The crowd saw him and erupted, not with chaos, but with relief. Applause, cheers, chants of his name. Phones lifted into the air, cameras flashed. He raised one hand, not to wave, but to calm. Then he spoke. I'm home, he said quietly. And I'm not afraid. The message was clear. He had walked in alone. But he wasn't walking out that way. Not anymore. The front steps of the police station had never been this full. People stood shoulder to shoulder, cameras pointed, eyes wide, voices buzzing. Some were cheering, some were crying, some just stood still, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Elijah stood at the top of the steps, the building behind him. His face calm, his suit still neat despite the hours in a cell. His voice hadn't been raised once since morning, but now when he spoke, the crowd quieted like they were waiting for a verdict. I walked out of my house this morning expecting a normal day, Elijah said slowly, voice steady. I was wrongfully arrested. I was thrown in a cell for asking a question, for existing. Murmurs moved through the crowd. I was lucky, he continued, because I had a name, people. No, but what about the ones no one hears about? What about the ones who don't get a camera, or a crowd, or a lawyer? He paused. Let this moment remind all of us. Justice should not depend on your name, your skin, or your silence. The crowd erupted again. Reporters leaned forward, catching every word. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes with a scarf. A man behind her whispered, "That's the truth." Inside the building, Chief Daniels watched from the lobby, his arms folded tight across his chest. He didn't speak, didn't blink much either, just stared through the glass as his station's secrets were exposed. Live. Beside him, Lieutenant Karen stood with her hands at her sides, heart heavy. She didn't try to stop Elijah. She didn't want to. She just wanted to hear what he'd say next. And he did not disappoint. "I don't want revenge," Elijah said. "I want accountability. I want answers. I want to know why my skin tone is still treated like a threat, even when I carry law books instead of weapons." He turned slightly toward the station doors behind him. "And I want everyone inside that building to know I'm not going anywhere. I will be watching. I will be speaking. And I won't stop until every officer, every system, and every leader understands what justice really means." The crowd roared. But Elijah didn't linger. He stepped down the stairs slowly, meeting hands, hearing thank yous, accepting hugs. His mother was there too, her arms around him in an instant, eyes full of both pride and pain. That moment, the embrace, the cameras, the silence that followed, it became the photo that would circle the internet before the sun went down. And far away, in federal offices across the city, it was the spark they had been waiting for. Inside, the station, the real panic had just begun. Daniels turned from the window. "We need to get ahead of this," he muttered. Karen nodded. Too late. The young officer Stevens stepped forward. "Sir," he said, "the DOJ just sent a formal request for access to our records." Daniels froze. "When?" "Just now. Email and fax," Stevens said. "It's official. They're opening a file on us." Daniels ran a hand down his face. "Unbelievable." "No, sir," Karen said quietly. "It was coming. We just made it easy." Daniels looked at her, eyes tired, voice lower. "What would you do if you were me?" Karen paused. "Apologize, publicly, suspend the officers, and then open the doors. Let the investigation happen. Or we'll be forced to do it anyway, but with cameras pointed at every step." Daniels didn't respond. He walked back into his office, closed the door, and for the first time in his long career, he didn't feel like the one in control. Meanwhile, Elijah walked through the neighborhood with his mother. People stopped him every few feet. "Thank you, sir. You've given us hope. Can we help?" And Elijah answered them all with the same thing. "Yes, but this is just the beginning." Later that day, as the sun dipped low and the city softened into evening, a press conference was announced. Police Chief Frank Daniels stood in front of microphones, surrounded by reporters and flashing cameras. His eyes were tired, his voice flat. "We made a mistake," he began. "A man was arrested without cause. That man was not only innocent, but someone this city should have respected, not restrained." He swallowed. Effective immediately, the 2 officers involved have been suspended pending an internal investigation. We are also cooperating with federal authorities. No applause, just questions, just long, uncomfortable silence. And Elijah wasn't standing behind him. He didn't need to. He had already said what needed to be said. He was somewhere else, sitting, in a quiet community center, surrounded by teachers, young activists, retired judges, and organizers who had waited years for a moment like this. On a whiteboard at the front of the room were 2 words, written in thick black marker. Community. Justice. Elijah picked up a marker, wrote under it, "Starts here." And the room nodded in agreement. The real work had begun. It had been 4 days since Elijah walked out of that police station. 4 days since his arrest had been recorded, reposted, retweeted, and replayed a million times. 4 days since city officials had begun scrambling, calling emergency meetings, writing public statements, and shifting in their seats as reporters asked hard questions they didn't want to answer. But Elijah? He hadn't disappeared. In fact, he was more visible than ever. He sat in a room that wasn't part of any courtroom or government office. A small community hall with plastic chairs, squeaky fans, and a leaky ceiling that dripped when it rained. But that room was packed, shoulder to shoulder, with people ready to make something real. Teachers, barbers, students, retired nurses, moms, pastors, young people in hoodies, older men in work boots. Not one of them was a politician, but every single one of them had a voice. Elijah stood at the front of the room, no microphone, no stage. Just him and a dry erase board with 3 words written in plain block letters: protect, educate, reform. He pointed to the words. "This is what we're going to do," he said simply. "We're not waiting for the system to fix itself. We're going to build something that works for us." A woman in the back raised her hand. "But how?" Elijah smiled gently. "We start small," he said. "Free legal advice clinics, oversight boards made of people from the community, school programs that teach kids their rights, and real pressure on the people in power, not through shouting, but through strategy." There was silence in the room, but it wasn't empty. It was full of thought, full of the kind of hope that grows only after pain. Meanwhile, across town, things at the station were changing too. Lieutenant Karen walked the halls, clipboard in hand. She had already filed for an internal audit. New training guidelines were being written. A federal liaison now had a permanent desk in the building. And Riley and Jenkins? Suspended. No badge, no gun. No more hiding behind the shield. But the real change? It wasn't in memos or meetings. It was in how officers were now looking at each other. Conversations were quieter. Movements more careful. The air that once carried pride now carried something else: watchfulness. Karen knew this wasn't a fix. It was only a start. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like they were walking towards something, not just away from a scandal. And the city? The city was listening. Billboards went up. Not paid for by corporations, but crowdfunded by the people. One showed Elijah's photo, calm, steady, walking out of the station, eyes ahead. Below it, in bold letters, "Power doesn't come from silence." Another one had just a quote: "Justice starts with one voice. Make yours heard." Young people wore shirts with Elijah's name on them. School art projects painted murals of unity and accountability. And the mayor, once invisible, had now been forced to speak. In a televised address, he tried to control the narrative. "We are working closely with community leaders and legal professionals, including Mr. Elijah, to bring change to our city." But Elijah wasn't in the room for that speech. He was standing in a parking lot outside a high school, surrounded by teenagers who had just finished a workshop on how to deal with police stops. One of the boys, a lanky 16-year-old with dreadlocks and wide eyes, raised his hand. "Mr. Elijah," he said, "why didn't you fight back when they arrested you?" Elijah looked at him. The whole group quieted. He took a deep breath. "Because they expected me to," he said. "And I wanted to show them, and the world, what real strength looks like." The boy nodded slowly, like something just clicked. Another girl asked, "But aren't you angry?" Elijah smiled. Not wide, just enough. "I am," he said. "But anger isn't the engine, it's the fuel. Purpose drives the car." And with that, he knew this was what mattered most. Not just fixing laws, but raising minds. Back at the community center, volunteers were putting up flyers. Free legal aid clinic, every Saturday. Know your rights, community training. Independent review board, first public meeting, this week. The ripple effect had become a wave. Karen heard about it from her niece. "My school's doing a civil rights essay contest," the girl said, grinning. They want us to write about Mr. Elijah." Karen smiled too, even as exhaustion clung to her shoulders. In her office, she looked at her own notes, internal complaints, citizen feedback, officer retraining schedules. She was knee-deep in the process of rebuilding something that had rotted quietly for years. But she felt ready, not because things were fixed, but because now, people cared. And it was Elijah who reminded them how. That night, as Elijah walked home with his coat over one shoulder, his phone buzzed with another invitation to speak at a college and another message from someone he hadn't heard from in years. Just 2 words. "Thank you." He paused at the corner where it all began. The diner. His car. The place where he had been stopped without reason. He stood there for a moment, then looked up at the street lamp overhead. Its light was steady now, like it had seen everything, and decided it was time to shine differently. 6 months had passed. The seasons had shifted. The city that once looked away was now learning how to look inward. Things didn't change overnight, but something had changed, and that something started with one man walking to his car and not staying silent when the world tried to push him down. Elijah stood once again inside the same police station, not in handcuffs, not in anger. This time he wore a visitor badge. This time they invited him in. A row of young police recruits sat in stiff chairs, notebooks in hand, eyes wide, unsure of what to expect. They were the next generation, fresh uniforms, clean boots, no field stories, no assumptions yet burned into their minds. Lieutenant Karen stepped to the front of the room. Her hair was tied back, her eyes calm but sharp. "I'd like you all to meet someone," she said. "You've probably seen his name in the news, but today you'll hear him speak in person." She looked to the doorway, and in walked Elijah. He didn't wear a suit this time, just a plain shirt and jacket, nothing fancy, no performance. Just a man with a story, and a room full of ears that might finally listen. He stood quietly for a moment, looked at their young faces, some nervous, some curious, some clearly unsure of how to feel. Then he said, "My name is Elijah. I was arrested for doing nothing wrong, and today I'm standing in front of you because I believe you want to do better." No one moved. He continued, "I've sued departments like this. I've seen the damage one bad stop can do to a life, a family, a city. But I've also seen what real change looks like, when people choose to listen instead of defend." A recruit near the back slowly raised her hand. "What should we do different?" she asked, voice soft. Elijah looked at her. "Ask more questions. Make fewer assumptions. Learn a person's name before deciding who they are. And never forget," he added, "your badge isn't a shield from mistakes. It's a promise to rise above them." The room was silent again. But this time, it was the kind of silence that follows truth, not fear. After the session, Karen met Elijah in the hallway. "They listened," she said. Elijah nodded. "They needed to. We all do." Outside, the sun had broken through gray clouds. It touched the tops of buildings, made the sidewalks glow, made the ordinary look new again. Later that afternoon, Elijah returned to the Community Justice Center, the same building that had started as a borrowed church basement, with folding, chairs and a flickering light bulb. Now it was buzzing with energy. Volunteers sorting documents, lawyers giving free advice to locals, students organizing town hall flyers. A new mural painted across the brick wall, showing people of all races holding hands in a circle, with one word in the center: dignity. Elijah stepped into his small office, where he found a letter waiting on his desk. It was handwritten, the kind of thing people rarely do anymore. It read, "I used to think people like you were troublemakers. Now I know you're protectors. Thank you for showing my son what strength looks like." A mother who once feared her own neighborhood. Elijah read it twice. Then he smiled. Later that evening, he stood outside the community center, watching. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, the breeze was soft. Somewhere nearby, a car stereo played an old soul song. Kids rode bikes down the block, laughing, and no sirens screamed in the distance. Karen walked up beside him, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "You still believe we can fix this?" she asked. Elijah took 1 cup, nodded slowly. "I don't believe in miracles, but I believe in people who don't quit." They sipped in silence. Then Karen said, "The federal report comes out next month. They're going to name every department under review. We'll be on that list." "I know," Elijah replied. "You still want to be involved?" "I never stopped being involved," he said. She smiled. "Good. We'll need your voice when it gets harder." "It already is hard," he said. "But that's why it matters." As night fell, Elijah walked home, alone, but never lonely. His path wasn't easy. It wasn't over. But now he had something stronger than anger. He had purpose. He had people beside him. And most of all, he had proof that a single day, even one filled with injustice, could become the reason a whole city starts to wake up. That's how change begins. Not with loud speeches, but with one man refusing to stay quiet, and a community deciding they've had enough. Together, they rewrote the story, not just for Elijah, but for everyone who comes next. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. These stories take time, heart, and care to create, and your support helps bring them to life. Thank you for being here.